And, and that's a good way of, when you add the prison industrial complex to this whole problem, right?
Which is the next thing we're talking about.
Quite a bit of sense, because, if you got people's jobs and you got a portion of your economy predicated on an industry existing, you don't have much motivation to question that. I get a good example. A good friend of mine moved to West Virginia a while back, and he's been kind of like in there dabbling around in local politics and things like that. And he knows a lot of coal miners, and coal miners don't want to hear about any negative aspect of coal to the environment because their livelihood depends on it. People who build cars aren't motivated to want to transition to something else if their money is invested in it. And it makes sense. I mean, it's kind of normal behavior that humans have. When you get comfortable and your life is a certain way, you kind of get to that, and you don't like to see maybe any other things that could be helpful. But that's what this prison industrial complex kind of like started to become. You can argue it goes back even further. After the American Revolution, for example, the United States became the world's leading experimental incarceration culture. Like, when they broke away from the British, you would be sentenced to death for pretty much anything in the British Empire. And one of the things the United States decided to do was eliminate the death penalty for everything except, these pretty serious crimes. But what that meant is you have to come up with a new system. If you're not going to kill everybody for doing something, what are you going to do? Put them in prison. The United States started coming up with this concept of serving time. You do a punishment, you get put on trial, you get sentenced to time. That didn't really exist before the United States of America. People would hold you in a prison until judgment was meted against you. But by the 1820s, 1830s in the United States, we create this incarceration system where we're like, we're going to take you out of society. We're going to put you in this cell and make you think about your crimes and hope that you will change it and come out and get better, which we obviously know doesn't really work oftentimes either. When you take people out of society, it tends to make things worse. But anyway, what happens is this creates this idea of incarceration, putting people in prison. We need to build prisons. Who's going to build the prisons? How do we build them? And if people, like we have today, private prison systems, if you have a private company investing in a prison system, they're going to want a return on their investment, and they can't get a return on their investment if those cells are not filled. And low-level marijuana arrests have oftentimes been a significant source of revenue, right? Significant source of revenue for local police departments, for federal prison systems, right? All of these different things. And so the motivation to eliminate it wasn't there. Like, we saw this like with prohibition. When prohibition ended in the early 1930s, there were a lot of people with a lot of jobs to make alcohol illegal, but so many people were against it that they had to repeal prohibition. Right afterwards, what do? They create this Federal Bureau of Narcotics to get those jobs and continue on the payroll, right? And so it's difficult to get people to see what helps get their lives functioning. And that's one of the difficult things about this is you have to step outside of your worldview, man. You have to look at this plant from a different perspective. There may be some different people or some strange people or different cultures that you're not used to who use the plant, but don't just dismiss them because you haven't been aware of them or understood them or are not part of them. Try to look at it in a different way.
It's funny that you say that, because oftentimes we profile people, and I don't think profiling in the act of profiling itself is bad, but I think it's the understanding of what are you truly trying to profile. If you see a guy walking down, for example, great example, you and me both walking down the same road, right? We don't look anything alike. People would automatically, without talking to us, start assuming things. The reality of it is, probably the look is the only two things that we don't have in common. Right? We both have families, both married, got kids same age, got this, I got to pay a mortgage, you got to pay a mortgage,
Yeah.
right? We got the
Pay
same
our
problem.
taxes, do our things, are good citizens, you know.
100%, right?
Exactly.
And so you have these misconceptions, and when you have a country that's full of a whole bunch of different people, there's a lot of revenue if you can own a prison,
Certainly.
right? Because misconceptions lead to allegations, and these allegations lead to jail time. I mean, how many times have we seen people come out and say that they were falsely accused? And so I do believe the prison complex system, the prison industrial prison let me do this one more time. The prison industrial complex has a lot to do with keeping these laws on the book that we don't need to keep on the book.
Right.
And I often say that we have way too many laws in this nation that are policed, and the police officers are getting a bad rap because they're having to police thousands of laws instead of 100 or two.
Right.
Right. And that's a hard thing to do when you're policing a whole bunch of laws, and all of a sudden people are going to jail for stupid things.
Right.
But when we look around, we see people of higher power getting away with everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's so true.
Really become misleading.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, police officers are expected to be like psychologists, psychoanalysts, counselors, and all these other types of things that they oftentimes they know very little about. I mean, a large portion of the police departments, you don't even have to have a bachelor's degree, much less in any sort of field, and you're expected these people to do things at a very low pay grade with oftentimes very long hours, um, protect themselves, protect society, and do all these things together, can be very taxing and very difficult. And it this requires reorientation, understanding of drugs and what they are and how they're used, why they're used. I think that's very important to understand, right? When we have a tendency to think of, a lot of people don't grow up in cannabis consuming cultures, oftentimes think of them as these criminal elements, or they them as kind of like belonging to uh, otherized groups or groups that they don't understand, or and really, cannabis historically has been a drug that oppressed people have been attracted to. And now, why? Well, because oppression causes what we know today as PTSD, right? Being in a war zone can cause PTSD. We didn't necessarily know that prior to World War One, when people started referring to the shell shock and things like this. But one of the reasons why veterans are attracted to cannabis when they consume it, and they feel a better part of it, is very similar to the reason why enslaved people may have been attracted to consuming cannabis, or poor people may have been more attracted to consuming cannabis, because what these three things, enslavement, poverty, experiencing war, what these things have in common are trauma. The effect that it has. I mean, if you can't buy food and you're pissed off all day and you don't like your job and you don't get paid as much as you feel self-worth, there's a problem. If you're enslaved and you can't have control of the fruits of your own labor, and you're being forced by somebody else, this causes stress. If you have to go into another country and try to protect people, and you got people shooting at you all over the place, come on, like, what do you think these things do? These are traumatic things. They require talking and working out, and therapy, sometimes discussion. Cannabis is a substance that has been associated with alleviating some of these issues, and it's one of the reasons why it has lingered around so long as a medicine. And if we can see it in that regard, instead of just thinking about people doing drugs just to get high, or just to be part of some criminal network or something like that. These are all deeply flawed misconceptions that we just don't understand, right?